Welcome to the Monopoly Mindset, the podcast where we uncover the strategies to build your real estate portfolio one property at a time.
We're your hosts, Tyler and Tommy, here to share our story of playing real-life Monopoly.
Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned investor, this is your go-to resource for mastering the real estate game.
So grab your board, roll the dice, and let's buy Boardwalk together.
Welcome back to the Monopoly Mindset. We're your hosts, Tommy and Tyler. We've made it to episode 10. I think we're both pretty shocked that we made it here. Last episode was great. I got to talk about Machel and Mill. Those are two of my favorite properties that I purchased, and hopefully you enjoyed that episode. We have another great episode today talking about Ty's first Airbnb purchase. It's a really nice story, and I think everybody's going to like it.
Yeah, 10 episodes has been honestly a lot of fun. Even if we're not getting a ton of views, I honestly think that I would just do this for a really long time just because I look forward to it, and it gives us some time to set aside to discuss real estate, which we like to do anyway. So
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, to your point. I mean, I woke up this morning looking forward to talking about real estate with you. So it's been a lot of fun. I look forward to keep going. I'll take part of the blame. I'm supposed to be our social media guy, and I have not been posting the way I should be. I'm trying to figure out the way TikTok works and Instagram, and it's been a little bit challenging, but I'm going to keep working at it, and we'll see some more traction here on social media to hopefully get some more views on the podcast.
yeah, we're both like the grandfather who doesn't know how to use an iPhone when it comes to TikTok. Like, we have literally no idea how it works.
Yeah, I was pretty much yelling at Ty and my computer last night saying I cannot figure this out, trying to post videos and they're still not showing as posted, but I posted them, so we'll get to it. But first, it's time for Pass and Go, where we break down our latest moves in the real life game of Monopoly. This is going to be a new segment where Ty and I kind of talk about what's going on in our current life playing Monopoly.
Yeah, we've pretty much been doing this the last couple episodes, but we wanted to make it more official and give it a cool name. So, yeah, let's see. This week, I got texted this morning at 6:30 a.m. My tenant's washer or dryer broke for the second time, and the dryer's like a year old, which has been cool.
Don't you love that?
Yeah, so again, these are just like when you're managing a property, like these are the things that just happen constantly. But I feel like I'm almost used to it. Like, it is what it is. It's like, again, these are especially a dryer. I mean, if I got a text about flooding, that would be a lot more stressful. But like, this is just like, all right, call GE, they come out, pay like $200 or whatever, and it's over.
Yeah.
I also I think I had my appraiser come out since the last episode to appraise my house for a HELOC, which the HELOC kind of goes a lot into the episode of why I'm opening up the HELOC and everything. And other than that, me and you, so once I get this HELOC, I think I at least plan on looking at my next purchase, which has been cool because it's been like 6 months since I was actually looking to buy. And I get antsy to buy. I'm looking every single day, but it's tough to look knowing that I don't have any money to buy. So I'm supposed to close on the HELOC Friday. We'll see if the appraisal comes back in time. But yeah, I think that's about it. I've been doing some research on Section 8, which looks like it could be very interesting.
Especially in your area, it seems like certain markets, Section 8 is better, and the pricing you were getting in your area appeared to be really aggressive.
Yeah, I feel like I've always had this like negative connotation about it, like it's just gonna cause problems, or like I guess I've only ever heard like not so great things about Section 8, and a lot of the people that me and you in our networking group have only really had good things to say about it. So I might start looking into that. Not like inner city Baltimore Section 8, which I do think you could risk getting not the best tenants, but like even in my county where the Section 8 rents from the county are like way higher than like market rent. It's really odd. But
And it's a guaranteed check from the government versus hoping that somebody's going to pay. I mean, the government's going to pay. It comes with more stipulations, right? Like, I think you were doing some research and you saw that you can't have any paint chips. So you got to make sure the paint is perfect in every aspect of the house. So it has its quirks. And also, just like anything else, you're going to need to interview the tenants and make sure that you find a good tenant, because there's, just like in, renting to a traditional family, there's good families out there, bad families out there, and then same thing with Section 8. You're going to have great tenants and you're going to have the not so great tenants. So still need to do a solid vetting process.
yeah, I don't know. I guess you saw that deal that was in Philly. There's a 3 unit for sale in Philly, and everyone was like, "This is a really good neighborhood." And because it's like a more expensive neighborhood to live in, the Section 8 rents were very, very high in that neighborhood for 3 units. So I thought that deal was pretty intriguing. Um, but yeah, how about
I
you?
know I was listening to that and I thought about, well, if you buy the first two and do Section 8 and then you just have an Airbnb in the top unit that was, um, what's a single unit called?
Studio.
Studio, yeah. It's like then you can just have an Airbnb studio in Philly in a decent area. That seemed like a good strategy.
Yeah, I ran the numbers on it myself yesterday, but I know I wouldn't be able to convince you to put half down on a not burr. So
Yeah, it would probably be a struggle, but the Airbnb aspect of getting to go up to Philly and watch the birds and then go sleep in there would definitely tempt me. So maybe we can talk about it more offline. I mean, my real estate or my week of pass and go didn't have too many unique things going on. I have some properties that are coming up here that are going to be vacant coming in June. And so trying to come up with the best plans. We haven't had the best of luck getting them filled with college students, which has been our traditional route of finding students. And so talked with my partners over there at TDJ and talked about maybe renting our houses out to single families and maybe even selling a house that isn't rented. And so there's a lot of strategy going on trying to figure out the best way to move forward. Do we want to keep these houses and just try to move them to traditional families, or hold out hoping that we still get college students even though we're getting pretty late in the year for that, or potentially selling a house because we have a lot of equity in it, and the return on equity is not great at the moment. So kind of selling a house to get into something better where you can make a little bit more return on your money. And that's a unique thing that I hate dealing in real estate, because I love to just own my properties forever. But once you start looking at your return on equity and it's like negative 1%, you can get that by pretty much just putting it into a savings account. So that's something that we're dealing with. And I'm not sure if I talked too much about Woodlawn on here. I know it's been up and down, but we're finally under contract and the sellers have found a home and looks like we're going to start moving forward. They wanted to close at the end of, or the beginning of April. And then I just got, so everything was kind of moving forward for a pretty quick close. And I talked to my attorney yesterday, and I've never heard or had this happen, but this is obviously why you go through the title process. My attorney told me that the title it's not necessarily a clear title. There's some quirks in it. And the title, like the property that they only own three sides. So they almost have to get it resurveyed to get the title updated, because they don't own like a closing section of their house, which is odd. And then there's also like a second parcel that's noted on the title that they own, but there's no other documentation clarifying that they own it. So they want to close April 1st, and my attorney's like, they have a lot of hoops and hurdles to kind of go through. So I don't think it's going to be an April 1st closing. And he kind of, and then go ahead.
just a couple thoughts. So one, when you say your attorney, because I've never like hired an attorney for a real estate purchase other than Hillcrest that we bought together. He's also a title company, right? So you're
Yeah,
just
so my attorney is a title guy. So he's, well, he's an attorney, but then he also runs like a
yeah.
title. Yeah.
And then just a thought on that whole thing. The deed and the title, or I guess it's just the deed that shows the ownership of the house. The title
Hmm.
is like the attached to the mortgage typically. This stuff always confuses me, but I remember when I bought my house, I for a primary, they offer they get their own insurance, like title insurance, and
Hmm.
then they offer title insurance to you, and it's usually like 500 bucks to 1,000, or maybe 200 to 1,000. I think mine was like 1,000 bucks for title insurance. And I remember when I was at my closing, I asked them, I was like, so what? And I got it, and I think I would recommend everybody that buys their first house do this, is get the insurance. I was like, what happens if you don't buy the insurance? And they were like, somehow, like the person selling you the house, let's say 5 years go by, you've lived there for 5 years, they've seen scenarios where somebody comes to you and they're like, by the way, the person that sold you the house never actually like owned the house. So you bought a house from somebody that didn't own it. I don't really understand it, but they're like, the house isn't yours anymore. Or like some like scenario like that. And like to me it doesn't make sense. Like, what do you mean I bought the house for this much money? And they're like, yeah, but somebody else had a lien on the house that we didn't find. Like the whole thing just seems super weird to me. Like I don't understand it, but my point
And that's
is,
why you pay for title insurance to
yeah,
avoid any of
buy
these
the
quirks.
insurance. Yeah, because
Yeah.
like last thing you want to do is buy something for $300,000. Somebody comes back to you a year later and says, "Sorry, it's not yours
Yeah.
anymore." I don't understand how that could possibly happen in 2025, like with our technology and our records. But I guess like you could be buying a house that basically only has a paper trail because it hasn't sold for 20 years, and then
And think about previous generations. A lot of things might have gone through with like handshake agreements. And TDJ at one of our properties, we have a little there's like a parking lot on the corner of our property, and it's almost in between our house and our neighbors. And when we bought it, the neighbor came out and like told us that he owns that and we don't own it, and to never park there. We're like, okay, sure, whatever. Like it looks like it's on our property, but he said that he bought it from the previous owner. So every year we pay our taxes and we pay for like our lot, and then we pay for an adjacent lot that's literally where the driveway is. And we're like, we own that. We've been paying taxes on it ever since we bought the property 5 years ago. So 6 years ago. Like this guy doesn't own it. He thinks he owns it. He parks on it. We don't touch it. But eventually we're gonna have a conversation with him like, hey, you actually don't own this. I don't know what to tell you.
yeah. I heard this. I saw, this is an aside, but I saw this scam video on like Facebook or something where like people would basically get a fake ID, like a fake driver's license. I'm sure it's not that hard to like fake like some government housing employee. No offense if you're a government housing employee, but like so you get a fake ID, they like go to the courthouse, and they basically transfer, like let's say my house right now, they sign my name and say that I'm transferring ownership to them, and then they sell my house, and like I lose all my equity in my house. Again, I don't understand how that's possible
Yeah.
today, but it's
But
very
even like
like,
David Green was talking about it at one point. He said it almost happened to him, or he knew somebody that it happened to with all the real estate transactions that he does. So it is something that's happening.
yeah. And then actually I heard on that scenario, insurance only covers from the day you close previous, so like the history of the house. And so you're not covered from the day you close moving forward. So I guess you can get like insurance for the future. But anyway, that's an aside, and I don't think 99.9999% of people don't have to worry about that. It's very
Yeah, so let's get into something that people do worry about or do care about. Ty purchased an Airbnb. So congrats, Ty.
yeah.
That's something I know was on your bucket list you really wanted to do, and proud of you for getting it done. So let's get talking about your Airbnb.
Yeah, it might have been on your list more than mine. I think you had originally you know, mentioned the Poconos before I did. I was interested in Airbnb. I didn't necessarily know where. Um, Definitely somewhere close that we plan on visiting, a couple times a year. Like a lot of people say it's like if you want to vacation somewhere, just buy the house and then vacation there a couple times a year, and rent it out for the rest. But so yeah, let's start from the beginning. So I have a realtor that I talk about in Maryland. He's great. And I was pretty interested in the Pocono area for a long time. Again, you were as well. I think we both still are. You lived like an hour from there, and I've been to like three bachelor parties there. My own bachelor party, your bachelor party. So
Yeah.
it's pretty big tourist area. Um, and I reached out to my realtor and I was like, "Hey, can you help me find a realtor up there?" I was like, "I would use you if you're like interested, but it's 3 hours away." And they were like, "No, we'll help you find one." And they gave me a contact. The guy was like probably in his 60s. I looked him up and I think he sold like one house the year before. And I was like, okay, that's a little weird. Um, but long story short, he basically gave me a lot of wrong information that I didn't know at the time was wrong. So we'll get into like a lot of the permitting process, but the county that I bought in has like a majority of the houses, and he basically told me that that county has a certain number of permits, which is true, that for short-term rentals, but that they were already out. Like you couldn't get a permit anymore. That part was false, but I didn't know at the time. So I was like, okay. And that kind of steered me away from the Poconos because like every single house that I liked was in this certain uh I guess it's township, not county, but it was in this certain township. And I was like, okay, I can't get a permit. And so we were interested in other areas. We started looking at some in Maryland. I was really interested and still am in Harper's Ferry, which is like a little historic town in West Virginia, right on the border of Virginia and West Virginia. We did like a an impromptu weekend trip there for Valentine's Day one year, and like we really loved it. So I'm still every day looking to buy potentially a short term rental there. But anyway, looking at the Poconos, didn't work out. And a couple months go by, and we mentioned before when we bought Hillcrest that you got me to join this networking group, and
Yep.
they have a podcast, a real estate podcast, and I believe that they started out, or at least focused on early on, buying Airbnbs in the Poconos. And that's where I was like very interested. Like, okay, they have like direct experience doing the exact thing that I want to do.
That's
Um,
one of the ways that I convinced Tyler to join the group was basically telling him, "Hey, if you join this group, like the worst thing that comes out of it is I bet you'll get a lot more Airbnb advice or experience for the Poconos. Hopefully, you can learn from them and be able to purchase a property up there in the Poconos. But worst case, you'll confirm your previous knowledge or learn a little bit more." And that's pretty much exactly what happened.
yeah. So, and I was also looking at like single family houses in my county. Again, I've talked about it a lot, but like I just kept putting offers in and nothing made sense. Or going to look at properties and not even putting offers in because like the offer would have been half of listing, which again, look, hindsight, you should still put the offer in no matter what it is. But so Tommy got me to join this group, and pretty much immediately they have an entire network up there. So they have a property management company, a realtor, a contractor, and like I've never invested out of state. Well, we bought the seller financing college rental together that we talked about, and that is out of state. But that didn't need any work, and there was already tenants in place, so
Yeah.
it's a little less scary. I think for me personally, the fear of investing out of state is doing a large rehab because that is one thing that I feel like you kind of need boots on the ground to like check up on the rehab and make sure the work's getting done. Property management, I feel Like I don't really feel nervous about that out of state at all. Like as long as you have a good property management company, they should be able to handle everything. Um, but
Yeah,
so
but
they,
doing a rehab when you can't necessarily see the property and like you want to have a little bit more hands-on or see the progress, it's a little bit trickier. They try to call you and explain an issue because, you know, repairs never go as planned or renovations never go as planned. There's always the, hey, there's actually not drywall behind this wall. um,
yeah,
or
well, I think it
something.
also depends on how good the contractor is. Like
Yeah.
I really liked mine, so it was honestly easy to do it from 3 hours away. But I've heard horror stories of contractors where like they're like, oh yeah, the work's done. They get paid. The person walks through the house and like half of the work's done, and they're just like, nah. Then they go ghost, and you're just kind of out. So again,
Yeah.
that was like the difficult part for me of investing out of state. But I almost like, and I'm still kind of at this point, is like things aren't working in my area, so like I need to figure out a way to look somewhere else.
Yeah, and Airbnbs are pretty cool to your point. Like the Poconos are somewhere maybe you and Danielle wanted to vacation to in general. So now you own a place up in the Poconos that you can vacation to when it's not rented out. You can make a couple extra dollars too compared to maybe a traditional rental. It's going to cost more to run and operate it and pay for some management expenses, but overall, there's still like it's unique because when you're managing a property directly, like you're more hands on, right? You just had a dryer broke, you have to fix that. When you're managing the Airbnb or when you own an Airbnb but you have a management company, there's a lot less maybe that you have to deal with from time to time. So there's just a couple different ways to go about it.
yeah, so I basically linked up like right away after joining this group. Like a week went by, and I linked up with a realtor that they had up there, and I think they had like a newsletter that they'd send out. So like everybody on their list, they would just send out like, hey, these are the properties for sale. Some of them were their listings, other ones were just on the market. And here's like the projected numbers. So they give you like the down payment. Okay, you need to add a hot tub. This is how much it costs. They would actually like walk through it with the contractor and say like this is the estimated renovation budget. And then here's your projected um earnings per year. And that was another thing that was really difficult for me buying an Airbnb. Me and you talked about this a lot, is like how do I find realistic estimates for how much this property is going to produce? Because for long-term rentals it's really easy. You just go on Zillow and look at what rentals are in that area. Like it's
Yeah.
the same thing as like how much is my house worth. You just find comps. But with short-term rentals, like I still think it's pretty difficult to find like realistic projections. I was using websites like AirDNA. So that basically you type in an address, it looks at every single short-term rental in that area. It like pulls data from Airbnb and VRBO, and then it kind of tries to give you a like projection. But I mean, we had somebody in one of our like weekly calls that basically said like that number is BS. So um, again, that was the thing that like I was really hesitant to buy. Like, what if AirDNA says it's going to make 70,000 a year and it does 30 because it just like doesn't know. So luckily, like this is what this company does. Like they only do short-term rentals. They own a bunch themselves and then they manage a bunch for other people. So they basically like had this number. They gave me an estimate and I felt like, okay, this is their job. I'm sure that estimate's going to be like pretty close to what it actually was. Or hopefully, I won't know yet until like a year goes by or 2 years. But so they send out this list, and me and Danielle were looking at a couple. The one that we put our first offer in, I was actually at the Poconos for my buddy's bachelor party when I got the email, and I was less than a mile away from this house.
Wow.
Yeah, but I actually didn't really like it at first. I don't really the rehab was a little bit bigger than I was looking for. Um, so I like thought about driving to the property, but I was like, I'm at my buddy's bachelor party. Like, I don't want to, work. I already actually
You drove up to see,
I drove
yeah,
up from the bachelor party to see Hillcrest, the property that we closed on. Like, well, we closed while I was there. I think we closed like Friday, and I drove up to the property Saturday to pick up the keys.
yep.
So I was like, I'm already doing some real estate stuff. It's like one of my best friends, so I'm not trying to go see another property with this realtor. But I think like a month went by, and again, like we talk about this all the time. When he sent it to me, it just hit the market. So like, if you don't love it, come back to it later because you can offer a lot less than it's listed for. And I think at the time it was listed for like 200. Um, and I didn't really like it for 200. So about a month goes by and I reach back out and I'm like, "Hey, like maybe I'll like do a little bit more research on this property." And I think we decided to put in like a pretty low offer. We offered 175 and this was an estate sale also. So family inherited the house. I don't know if the parents lived there and then like their kids inherited it. I feel like that's typically the situation, but a lot of
Yeah.
times the kids don't really want it. Like they might not live there. They're not real estate investors, so they just like, all right, let me just sell it and get the cash. But it's the perfect scenario because a lot of times in that situation, they just don't want to deal with it anymore. Maybe it reminds them of their parents, and
Or they
they're
have so many other things they're trying to clean up after their parents passed away. This is just one extra thing on their list. And it's like, okay, let's sell this so we can get some money to pay off some more of their debt or, so they can get their inheritance a little bit quicker or whatever it might be. So it's almost for them, how quick can I just get this off of my plate and go back to my regular life? I mean, a lot of people don't like selling or buying a home in their traditional life as it is. So to inherit a house that you have to deal with, it's a lot easier just to sell it quickly.
yeah. So it's a estate sale can definitely be a good way to get a good deal. So I think it was on the market for 2 months at this point, and the day that I put the offer in at 175, the realtor said, "Hey, we got another offer. Do you want to change your offer?" And so what my realtor suggested is there's something called an escalation clause. And I know you have purchased a couple properties using this, but
Yep.
basically you offer 175 because you don't know what the other offer is, which is one thing that I really hate about real estate. I guess it's like it's a sales tactic from the seller's perspective, but I feel like it's almost like a little shady. Like, I don't know. In my mind, like it should be open. Like, hey, this is what the offer is for.
Yeah, so like almost like an auction. Like if you really want something, let me pay 2 grand more than Ty. Ty's offering 175, let me offer 177. Like not knowing that, it's like I really wanted that house. I would have offered if Ty offered 185, maybe I offer 187. Like I
Yeah.
really wanted it. And it's almost like you do yourself a disservice. Well, the escalation clause helps out a lot, but without the escalation clause still, like and even with it, like if somebody put in 250 for that house, for example, like say it went way over list, and you're like, well, I would have bought it for 255. Like, but
Yep.
my escalation clause only went up to 225. So now I don't get this house, and you still didn't get the money that you could have. So I agree. It kind of prevents bidding wars when you don't know what the prices, like what the competing offer is.
Yeah, but it can also really work out in the seller's favor because like let's say I offer 100 and then you offer 105, but I don't know what you offered, right? And then they're like, "Hey, we got another offer." And I'm like, "Wow, I really want this house. I don't know what their offer is. I think your offer is 120, so I'm gonna offer 130, which is like way higher than your offer. But because I didn't know what your offer was, I went high and whatever.
Yeah. So
So
an escalation clause is going to basically be Ty wants to buy this house for 180, right? So he's going to put in an offer for 180 with an escalation clause up to 200,000 for this example. And what that means is if another offer did come in for 190, well, ties, and then you can put in like how much do you want to beat that offer by. So if another offer comes in for, so say Tom, I want to buy the house for 190. Well, Ty has an escalation clause to go $1,000 over. So now Ty automatically is offering 191 for this house that he just put an offer in for 180. But with his escalation clause, another offer came in for 190. He now offered 191 for this house, and they're going to get the highest offer from Ty, and it'll do that all the way up to 200,000.
Yeah, so my exact numbers were I offered 175 with an escalation clause up to 185 with increments of 2,500 over the other offer. So turns out the other offer was 180. And because I was willing to go up to 185 with an increment of 2,500, I got the place for 182,500. Um, so my realtor, calls me and he's like, "Hey, we got it, 182. Like, good thing we did the escalation because if we didn't, we wouldn't have got it." And again, we've talked about this. Like, to give up a deal over, I mean, you got to stick to your numbers, like for sure. But to give up a deal over 7 grand, like, I think in real estate in 10 years, you will always look back and be like, "Wow, I wish I bought that property for the extra 7,000." So,
And
um,
again, like what is, I know 7,000 goes to the purchase price, right? But like from a monthly payment perspective, it's only what, $20 or so?
Yeah, it's not a lot, and from a down payment perspective, it's like an extra 2,000. So it's not going to like drastically change your ROI.
No.
Um, so I got my first offer accepted in the in the Pocono area. And again, I've been putting offers in like near my house like for months and months and months, and I don't know if it's just more competitive or what, but like I mean, I never would have thought would have gotten my first offer accepted, which was
Yeah,
like
this is something Ty and I've talked about a lot. That every offer we put in his market, kind of in that Baltimore, DC area, and I know he's more of like the suburbs in Maryland, but it's still a very competitive real estate market everywhere there. And every offer we put in on houses were just turned down, and we kind of gave up buying in his area because it's like we're doing all this work and we're getting nothing in return. So for Ty to then go to the Poconos and put his first offer in and get it accepted was definitely a change in pace for the way that he's been trying to buy real estate. But I think it also speaks to how important it is to have a great real estate team. And I know he's got a good real estate team there in Maryland, but this company that he purchased his property, his Airbnb through, I mean, they were doing thorough reports and sending a lot of detailed emails to all of their clients that were looking for Airbnbs in the specific market. This is kind of all that they do is they focus on Airbnbs in the Poconos. And so buying an Airbnb through a company like that, it simplifies the process a lot of trying to figure out what you need to know. Like you're trying to do a bunch of research on your own and there's just so much research and it's tough to understand the market. And it's better in that scenario to kind of go through some experts. And I think that also made this relatively simple for Ty.
yeah, just one kind of counter though, uh, to that is that my market's tough from a buyer's perspective, and we talk a lot about cash flow versus appreciation, and cash flow in my area doesn't
Yeah,
really
yep.
work out that well. But if it's really hard to buy a property because it's such a competitive market, that means when you do buy a property and you sell it later down the road, it's going to appreciate a lot more, and you're going to get a higher price because it's such a competitive market. So there's pros and cons, right? It's a lot harder. It might take you 20 offers to get something accepted, but when you go to sell, you're not going to have any problems selling. And chances are, the more competitive the market, at least in my mind, it's a better appreciating market. So
Yeah, it's kind of appreciation versus cash flow, and some of the deals Ty and I are looking for are more cash flow based, so a lot of deals didn't pencil out that way, and then it was very competitive. But to Ty's point, a lot of the people we were competing with were putting cash offers in for $300,000, $400,000 houses, and the reason they're doing that is so that they can play the appreciation play. Hey, I'll buy that house for 400. This is an appreciating market that might go up 8% or something along those lines. So that's probably why it became such a competitive market to Ty's point. So let's get into the financing. How did you finance your Airbnb purchase?
Yeah, so I did this. I've actually never heard of this, but I actually got two loans on the property when I bought it. So I got a loan that's like a primary loan. So it's like the first lien, it's a regular mortgage. It's a fixed 30-year loan. I have a pretty good interest rate for the time. And that's just, that gets paid the same way, principal and interest. And then also at closing, I had a second bank open up a HELOC on the property for for the rest of the loan, if that makes sense. And that is a standard HELOC where it's 10 years, interest only, adjustable rate based on prime. We talked about that last episode. So it's whatever prime is plus, I got plus 0.75. So whatever prime is plus 3/4 of a percentage. Um, and so I automatically have a second lien on the property in the form of a HELOC, and the HELOC's maxed out. So we're both opening up HELOCs on our primary. That's a line of credit that has a $0 balance. I bought this property with a line of credit that's maxed out. Um, and again, there's just a lot of and the reason that I did this is because the broker that I was dealing with basically said if I did it this way, I could get a much lower 30-year fixed rate because to them I have a lot more equity in the property, or their loan to value is really low, right? Even though I don't actually have the equity in the form of the HELOC, to them as the first lien, they only have a loan for 60%, right? Um, so there's just I mean, again, if you have a good broker, they will offer these random things to you that I've never heard of. And I asked my dad about it, and he said it was really common back in the day. I forget, like a 90, it was like a 60, 90, 10 or something like that. I forget, but he said I think they did it this way back in the day, like before the crash, to basically get people able to buy houses with no money down. So they would do like a 90-10. I think the first bank would give you a mortgage for 90% loan to value. And then they'd go to a second bank and get like a loan for the other 10%. So bank one is like, oh, we only offer 90% loan to value. But then bank two is like, well, we'll open up a HELOC for you to give you that 10%. So I did yeah, that kind of situation. And I knew that I was doing a pretty significant rehab, and I wanted a HELOC anyway. So the goal going forward is because I did such a significant rehab and I built up a lot of equity, in a couple years I can go and refinance and do a cash out refinance and pay off that HELOC, but still have it open as a line of credit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. It's a unique way to purchase a property. When you told me about it, I've never heard of it before. But the way that it saved you a couple dollars on your payment each month, and it seemed to make sense because it's always tough to get a HELOC on kind of an investment property in general. So this was a way to, over time, if you got some extra money, you could kind of pay off that HELOC, and now you have a HELOC on like an investment property on top of a HELOC on your personal residence. So it gives you some extra flexibility in the future doing it that way versus just having a traditional loan. It was a cool product to try, and we'll keep following up like throughout the process and see if you enjoy it. Like maybe it prevents you from refinancing in the future because you like the way that loan structure is. So we'll keep seeing, seeing what we want to do or what you want to do with that specific loan.
Yeah, the one question that I have is if I go refinance, obviously when you refinance, they require themselves to be first lien. I
Hmm.
wonder if they can take the place of the first lien, so pay off the first lien, but then keep the second lien in the form of a HELOC and pay it off, but have it open with a
Yeah,
$0.
there's certain the I believe that there's a loan out there where like a HELOC can be done if you own the house outright, right? So if you did purchase the house, like to your point, I think like what you're saying is can you kind of have a HELOC as your primary loan on the house?
No, it would still be secondary because the company that I would refinance with, cash out, they would require themselves to be first lien.
Okay, so I was referring to if you paid off like the first loan and then you just kind of had that HELOC and then you expanded the HELOC
Yeah.
so that that covered everything. Because I think that is an option where people do they do put HELOCs on properties so that they can get, interest only loans and then their mortgage is significantly cheaper that way. Obviously, it's a little bit more risky, right? Because you're not paying anything towards principal, you're just paying interest. But it's definitely a way to tap into cash in on your rental portfolio.
Yeah, I've always been a little like weary of adjustable rate. And I think if you're doing like a adjustable on your entire house balance, that can be scary. I've just heard so many people just lose their whole business because of adjustable. I still to this day see it. Like people get adjustable, and I think adjustable is way more common with commercial. So like
Yeah, it's way more
where
common in commercial for sure.
yeah. So I keep seeing like in 2020 rates were really low. People got adjustable rate mortgages. They were like 5 to 7 years, and then the money's due. Like it's a balloon payment for 5 to 7 years. Well, it's 2025. Rates have jumped up dramatically. People are going to have to, I don't know, refinance, and the numbers don't really make sense anymore. Or like they ran their numbers with the rate from 2020, what was like 3%, and now they're at like 8%. And so I was just always a little nervous to do adjustable, but one, I got an adjustable. The HELOC is on a very small percentage of the house, right? It's like a third.
Yeah.
It's not the entire balance. My HELOC balance is 55,000. So like if my rate doubles, I'm not like completely screwed. But if your rate doubles on $1 million, like that's
And
massive, right?
that's where it gets more scary is these larger commercial, like several $1 million properties. And if you have like a $3 million property and your rate jumps 2%, it's going to be a significantly higher payment. And then the way that the commercial properties work is if you're getting, $300,000 in rent payments, but you're getting the $3 million, once that interest rate jumps, like your return looks so much worse that the bank is actually going to like qualify you for less money and you're going to owe money and when you go to refinance versus pulling any money out, and that's what makes it like kind of blow up in the commercial side. Where for Ty and I on these smaller properties, it's maybe not as big of a deal, but when you hear these large commercial investors that are going through something like that and causing them to struggle, it definitely makes our ears perk up when we hear these types of scenarios and try to avoid them.
Yeah, and I also felt better because the sentiment in our country right now is that rates are really high. And so like in my mind, they're always going to go down. Now, historically, like even 7% is not that high. In like the 90s or the 80s, we were up to like 13%. So I'm not saying that there's no way my adjustable can go up, but at least like the federal government has only really discussed lowering rates. So in my mind, it's better to get an adjustable rate when rates are already really high versus again if you would have gotten that adjustable rate in 2020, you're like this is awesome, I got a 2% rate and then 2 years go by and your rate's 7. So again, I'm kind of just assuming or hoping that rates are going to drop and not go up, but if they go up, like again, it's not a huge lump sum.
I think we're all hoping that rates drop. I don't think they'll ever get back down to 3%. Hopefully, maybe 4.5 in a
Yeah.
perfect world. That'd be nice. I have a 5% on my primary here. I mean, that's not terrible, but once you start getting over 5, it definitely becomes more difficult. But the positives are if you buy real estate now while rates are higher, when a lot of people can't afford them, when rates do drop, the prices A should go up, and then B, if you got a good deal with a 7% interest rate and then rates drop to 5%, well, that's going to be a home run deal once you get to refinance. I mean, you might like lose like your payment might not drop as much because the property's going to be worth more, but if you can pull out some of that equity and still keep the same cash flow that you got today, that's going to be a win.
Yeah, that's been my exact mindset all the way through COVID is like with, early on the housing market was kind of like unknown. Like it jumped up so fast. People were like, is it inflated? Is it going to drop back down? And my whole mindset was like, I don't care what the market's doing. Like if I get a good deal now at 7%, like you said, I'm looking at all my properties with high interest rates. Like in a couple years, if I can get like 5%, then my cash flow is going to go up on every single property and they're all going to become good deals.
Yeah, and I think part of it is when we say people that we hear from, I mean, obviously Ty and I listen and talk to an older generation a lot, and I think the older generation has gone through the '08 crash, and like Ty and I were in what, high school at that time, middle school, like we didn't really understand it as much, and so our like talking to parents or just the older generation, where you just hear like that '08 crash, and everybody thinks like that's coming again because that's what happened the last time that the prices kind of jumped up, and there's a lot of things that are different this time around than what was happening in '08. And like to Ty's point, there was a lot of people getting 100% financing, not just on one house, but on five, six, seven houses. So
we're
if you
like
give somebody,
105%. Like they were like
yeah, giving
putting,
upside down loans on
yeah,
properties and
yeah,
just giving them to us, like, so Ty and I as investors, we would have gotten 10 properties and we probably wouldn't have been as stupid. So I would hope that we would have made it. But that's what was happening. And like, so when you have all these people buying multiple properties, that's really what caused the market to crash the way that it did. And I don't foresee that happening this time. And obviously, I'm not an expert, but that's what a lot of the real estate people that I've talked to or listened to and read about, that they don't see the crash happening the same way because there's not the financing's been much stricter. And we know that because as we try to get our loans, it's been freaking impossible. Like the banks are very difficult to deal with. That's why we've gone the DSCR route a lot in some of our recent purchases, and that's why Ty kind of found a more unique way to purchase this property for Airbnb that he just purchased. And I think because of all those stipulations and the way that the banks are having more regulations, it's going to prevent that type of crash. So we will see interest rates drop hopefully here in the future, but I think prices of real estate are just going to go up. It's going to be tough for them to drop.
yeah. And I think, I mean, also the market is really based on supply and demand, just like any other product is based on supply and demand. And I think from what I understand, again, I'm not a, a macroeconomic expert by any means, but because material costs went up so much in 2020, the supply they were building at a much slower rate. And population growth continues to happen every single year. So like as supply goes down or stays steady, basically it can't meet the demand, and therefore prices will continue to go up. Which actually is really interesting. I just an aside, but I was listening to a podcast and he was like, when you're looking at like what market do you want to invest in? He was like, everybody talks about Austin because everybody's moving to Austin. Like he was like, I don't just look at population growth, I look at building. And I also saw a ton of building in Austin. So even though demand is going up, supply is going up. He was like, I found this other town where like demand, not as many people were moving there, but he was looking at the number of new builds and it was like non-existent. So he was like, I chose this option based on more of looking at supply versus demand. Because again, it's both things are in the equation. But anyway, back to the financing. We've kind of bashed on our experience with banks, I think, a little bit. Like we've had not the best experiences.
Definitely me. I mean, Ty might have some better experiences, but a lot of my experiences with banking relationships haven't been great. So I'm definitely the one that's been bashing the banks. And I don't mean it in any disrespectful way. It's just the situations, processes that I've gone through with the banks have been more frustrating to say the least. So that's definitely maybe more on me than Ty.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say in this deal, so I was actually working with two banks, and I was open with both of them. Again, I think that's smart to know that they have competition, and they can't just give you whatever you want. So the first guy that I was working with, he gave me certain projections and interest rates, and then I told those to my realtor, and he was like, "Hey, give this guy a call." Again, if you have a good realtor, they should really have the team for you. So then I called the second guy. He gave me the HELOC option that I talked about, and even the primary rate was pretty low. And the first bank was like, "Hey, send me like the contract or like the pre what's it called when they give you like all the numbers. It's like 30 pages of words, but it has like projected interest rates." But
It's like a kind of like a pre-closing document, right? Like it's like a projection. I just got one the other day for the purchase of Woodlawn, but I'm trying to remember what he called
yeah,
it.
I'm drawing a blank. Pre-disclosures, that's what it is.
Yeah,
Pre-disclosure. So like
pre-disclosure.
you're not locked in at all. You can easily switch banks at that time. So I sent it back to the first bank, and he was like, "Honestly, dude, this is a lot better than what I can offer, and I would honestly go with this." He was like, "I looked over it all. It looks like exactly what the guy's explaining, and I would go with this bank." And I just wanted to mention that because like now when I'm going to look for a house, I'm going to go to Bank 1 just because he was honest with me. He gave the deal away. He acted in my best interest basically and not his own. Like another bank could have very easily been like, "Oh, like I can do way better than that," and then they can't, or they're like, "This doesn't really look very good. Like you should definitely use
Yeah,
me."
I had the opposite experience when I purchased timber with Sarah. I had a buddy, Zach, I'll shout out Zach Koenigsberg, and he at the time, I don't think we've purchased a house through him. He was just like newer into becoming kind of a loan officer, and I wanted to give him a shot. And then there was the guy that I've used for two or three other properties, and so that's obviously the guy I've been continuously buying my houses through. And so I reached out to my old contact, and then I reached out to Zach. My old contact told me like, "Hey, probably can't get you anything under 4%." And I don't remember the percents exactly, but he's like, "Probably can't get you anything under four, and you can't close in anything from like 60 to 90 days. We're just so backed up. The whole market's overwhelmed." This was during COVID when everybody was backed up. And Zach's like, "Dude, I can get you 3.5. We can close in 30 days, like guaranteed." And I'm like, "All right, like I trust you. You're my buddy, and this is what you're telling me. Your rate's better. Your time to close is better." Sarah and I wanted to move out of the house sooner. The other gentleman like called me and was very rude and like angry, and he's like, "There's no way that they're gonna close in 30 days," and he's like screaming at me like, "All right, well that's what I'm being told, and like I trust my buddy, and their rate's better." And he's like, "And he's lying about the rate. There's no way he can get that. You're gonna get screwed, and then you're gonna have to call me back." And just like real disrespectful conversation, just kind of yelling at me. And like to your point, Ty, I've never called the guy back, never talked to him ever since that phone call. And that's how you burn a bridge, burn a relationship. If that guy would have said, "Hey, you know what? Give him a try." Like that seems crazy in today's market, but go ahead, try him out. Like, sure, the next time I went to buy something, maybe I would have given him a call or had a conversation. But because of the way he acted, I'm never, calling him again.
Yeah, exactly. You just like it's just business is networking, right? And like these banks can be
Yeah.
such like a-holes, but again, like
You're not going to win every deal. So the best thing you can do is just be nice, let people know the products that you have, and maybe you'll fit them in a different scenario in the future. But
exactly.
people always remember how you treat them, but they won't always remember like that specific experience or much about you. But they'll always remember how you were treated. And I remember being treated like crap, and so I don't ever want to talk to him again.
Right. And so like I really respected the fact that this guy was like, "Hey, like I can't offer as good as this other bank can." So I mean, not that I've used him, but like he's definitely on my mind when I go to buy another
Yeah,
property.
he's on your Rolodex when you go to get a new property. You're gonna contact him, see what options he has, and potentially use him for the future.
Right. Because to
But
your point, like brokers have a bunch of contacts with banks, but they have different like rates and scenarios for every different type of loan. So like your point, he might not have had the best option for my scenario, but next time I might want to do a DSCR and he might have the best option. So
exactly. So I think we went through a lot. We plan on doing the Airbnb in a part two, one and two, because it's a lot. We kind of spent a lot of time here discussing how Ty found the property, the financing behind the deal. I think we're getting pretty close to wrapping up this episode, and then stay tuned for part two, where we're going to talk about a little bit more of Ty's process of furnishing the property, some repairs that he went through, and a lot more that went on in the Airbnb process.
Yeah, honestly, like everything we've discussed has probably been like 5% of the work at this point. It's a lot of the again, I've in short-term rentals, depending on the area, permitting and like regulations can be a huge uh not problem, but just like a lot of work to figure everything out and get all the right permitting. So that was a huge part of my time. And then again, the renovations and the furnishing. So
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to wrap up or give any more, I don't know, tidbits that you're gonna excited to talk about in next week episode for episode 11 of the Airbnb?
um the only thing I wanted to mention is back to like investing out of state is we offered on this house without seeing it in person. And I think that's a really, there's different barriers that we mentioned. Like the first barrier is buying your primary or making your first offer. Like that's like a huge mental barrier. Um, Second barrier is actually closing on your first primary. But then like as you do these things more, they start to become like, not as intimidating. So other than the college rental, which you did see in person, so I felt good. Like we offered on this house from 3 hours away based on videos that my realtor sent me. And then we did go see it in person before we closed. So that kind of gave me closure. Like if anything drastic is different from the videos that you sent me, like we don't have to close. But yeah, I would just say like don't be scared to invest out of state and make offers even if you don't see it in person because again, you have like clauses that allow you to get out of the property.
Yeah, and my the realtor that I've used down here in Florida, I've watched her video the other day, and she said, in Florida it was a lot more common. People were moving from upstate New York or from Pennsylvania, and they're moving down to Florida, and it's a little bit trickier for them to see the property. And there was a lot more, kind of your point, like FaceTime, Zoom calls, videos being sent, and then people buying property sight unseen. And just because of the way this market's been, it's hot if you have a really nice property, but if you have a mediocre property, it's probably sitting for a little bit longer. And she said she's seen an increase in people holding off and like waiting to fly down and just check out the property to make sure that it's perfect. And I think every time or every market's a little bit different. So where Ty obviously was able to get his first offer in by doing it that way, by buying it sight unseen and looking at the videos. There's some people that aren't buying properties that way and they're waiting to fly up, and it could potentially cause you to miss a deal. So to Ty's point, I wouldn't necessarily be scared to buy a property like that. And then there's always ways out, to your point. Like if you got there and there's something wrong with the foundation, or get an inspection, and there's certain ways that you can back out of the deal. So putting something under contract if it's out of state isn't the end of the world, for sure. It can actually be a strategy to help you get a property.
Yep. So
Cool.
yeah, we'll continue the rest in the next episode.
Awesome. Stay tuned for part two of Ty's Airbnb experience, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks.
See you later.